broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of Gun Guy Radio is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to episode 178 of Gun Guy Radio. This is a podcast that shines a positive light on the firearms lifestyle. I'm your host, Jake Challand, and this is your weekly dose of positive firearms talk without the politics. And we have a great interview lined up this week with Timothy J. Mullin, author of 365 Guns You Must Shoot. And Timothy, or otherwise known as TJ, is quite a prolific author. He has many books on Amazon about revolvers, classic Smith & Wessons, training, and lots of good work. Been author for many years, writes for some of the bigger gun magazines. I really enjoyed having a chance to have him on the program and talk about his newest book, 365 Guns You Must Shoot, which is actually a really nicely well done book. And the cool thing about TJ is that he insists that he only writes about guns that he's actually had experience with, that he's actually shot at the range.
Do you shop on Amazon? How about your spouse? Does your mom? Does your company? Why not use the Firearms Radio Network's Amazon affiliate link next time you shop Amazon? Bookmark firearmsradio.tv/Amazon, or click through the Amazon link in the right-hand corner of firearmsradio.tv. Get it? Got it? Amazon it.
So Patriot Patch Company makes this episode of Gun Guy Radio possible. Check out patriotpatch.co. Currently have the Firearms Radio Network t-shirt pre-order going on, and also the patriotic flag 4-pack of flags, morale patches going on over there. So patriotpatch.co. Special guest author TJ Mullin, who just released the book 365 Guns You Must Shoot. Very cool. How you doing, TJ?
Just fine today.
Get to know you a little bit. How did you first get into shooting? Did you grow up in a household where your father was into guns and stuff like that?
No, not at all. My dad passed away when I was 11, actually, but my father didn't have any weapons at all. But from the time I was a small child, I was always very interested in firearms, and as a consequence, I've been studying the subject for a long time now. I started being interested in it when I was probably about 6 or 7 years old, even though no one in my family on either side was interested in that subject. None of them were hunters, none of them were shooters, but I've been avidly interested in this subject since I was a small child, and I've been following it now for over 60 years.
Very cool. Did that lead you to joining the Army, or how did that come about?
No, as I'm sure most people realize who've been in the Army. If you've never been in the Army, you don't realize this. But if you've ever been in the Army or the military, you realize is that they don't like guns in the military. And if you are interested in guns, the military is not a place for you to be, because they don't like guns and they don't like shooting, and they're not interested in any of that type of thing. Matter of fact, most of them are afraid of things like that because they're more afraid of someone having an accident than they are in someone protecting themselves. So when you go in the Army, you figure that, all these people will be out there shooting their weapons off and practicing every day and everything of that nature. But point of fact, that's not true at all. The Army is one of those few places in the world where they can make shooting not enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, and there's, some history to that, too, where there's some, been stories of, the military slow to adopt modern firearms because they shot more rapidly and would use up ammo or waste ammo more quickly.
Yeah, well, that's one of those theories that we see a recurring theme of that, because, of course, during the American Civil War, that was one of the reasons why they didn't use cartridge firearms, even though they obviously could have done so, because you had people who thought that they were going to waste ammunition and it was going to be too expensive. And of course, anyone who thinks about it realizes that the cost of putting a soldier in the field and keeping him equipped in the field is way in excess of anything he's likely to shoot up. And of course, the more opportunities you have to fire a weapon, the more likely it is that you're going to hit something with it. So those types of theories are always been proven to be bad, and are only put forward by people who are not too sharp on their guns. I fear most people you find in the military. I mean, you have to make it clear to everyone that the fact that you're interested in firearms doesn't mean you have anything to do with military applications whatsoever, because people who are in the military, most of them like guns. I mean, look at all the leaders during the Second World War. Very few of them had any interest in firearms of any type, shape, form, or fashion, because they're interested in things that are important in the military. And in the military, what's really important is logistics, not guns.
So during your military service, did you get your hands on any interesting firearms where you, as a civilian, you may not have?
Well, not really, because I've made a big point of going out and locating various guns over the years, and this has been kind of a big project of mine. I did a series of books for Paladin Press where we tested military weapons throughout the world, starting in 1870 and coming forward to the year 2000. And as a consequence of this kind of dedicated pursuit of various guns, I have to say that I believe in my heart of hearts that I've probably fired more varieties of weapons than anyone else that I know, because frequently you'll end up, in order to shoot some of these weapons, you have to travel far and wide to do it. Some of the weapons that are in the 365 book, for instance, you'll note testing, like, for instance, the M41 submachine gun in Switzerland. Well, I don't know anyone, frankly, besides myself, of my acquaintances that have actually taken that weapon and shot it, besides myself. You'll see people who take pictures of them, whatnot, but part of the deal with my books is that I always have to shoot them. Many of these pictures that you'll see in books of mine, you'll see pictures of me shooting them, and it's not because I think I'm so good looking. I take those pictures specifically so everyone knows that I actually shot the weapon. I just didn't take pictures of it. I didn't just lay it on the ground. And I didn't do like you see these books that are printed in England by some of these English gun writers who, unfortunately, since they live in a society that is culturally deprived and they can't own guns of that type, they don't get a chance to shoot them. And I make a point, I will never write about anything that I have not shot. And I try also to take them on some type of long hike also, so you can see how they feel when you take them on a long hike, because many weapons, it might sound great when you just shoot them on a range. When you start walking with them for a couple of miles, you'll find that they're not nearly as handy as you might like. So you really have to take them, you have to shoot them, you have to shoot them on a combat course, and you have to take them for a hike if you really want to know how some weapon really works and how it's whether it's handy or not. And finding places where you can do that, it's not always so easy, because I don't have access to, say, the West Point Museum or the FBI vault, where you can just go draw weapons out of the vault and go take them out and shoot them. So in order to do that, you have to really apply yourself to the task. And as a practical matter, I've managed to go all around the world shooting guns, because in order to write these books, that's what you have to do. And if you want to test an LM-25 Swiss light machine gun, there's only one place that I know to do it, and that's in Switzerland. So if you want to do it, you better plan on getting to Switzerland, and you better plan on knowing some people when you get there that have got that kind of stuff. So put it all together, it gets to be a big project.
Sounds like one hell of a job.
Well, that's tough work, but someone's really got to do it, right? It's just a hard job. Yeah.
So what years did you serve in the military, and then what did you do following that?
Well, originally when I took ROTC when I was in college and got my commission through ROTC, and I graduated at the top of my class so I could pick my branch. And as a consequence, I picked infantry, which I thought was the right branch to pick. And I was an infantry officer for a number of years, and then I graduated from law school and became a judge advocate general's officer for a couple of years. And then when I got out of the service, I opened up my own law practice I practice law here in St. Louis, Missouri, and been practicing here in St. Louis since '73. So that's what I do now.
And it says you were also at one time a deputy U.S. Marshal?
That's correct, yeah. I was. I did that for a period of time before I was in private practice. I worked for the U.S. government for a couple of years and did that, but then I left working for the government and got an honest job.
Wait, you said you were a lawyer, though.
That's correct.
No, very cool. So, covered how you got into shooting, some of your background here. So when did you really start, this journey of writing these books?
Well, the first book I wrote was titled Training the Gunfighter, which, by the way, I would point out to you that when Elmer Keith reviewed the book back in 1981, he noted that it was one of the 10 best books he'd ever read, which, being a big Elmer Keith fan, I have to say I take as high praise. And that was, a very successful book. Then I got the idea that I thought it would be a nice idea to have a book rather like Small Arms of the World, but only an actual test book showing the weapons actually being tested and shot. And as I said, I did a 3-volume series for Paladin Press, where we did 1 volume of nothing but military rifles, 1 volume of military handguns, and 1 volume of military submachine guns and machine pistols and combat shotguns. And those have been very well received also. I did a book for Small Arm, English publisher, I can't remember their last name now, the Greenhill Publishing in England, on special operations weapons and training methods. And then I did a variety of volumes for collector-grade publications out of Canada. I've done a couple of books on Colt pistols, one on Colt pre-war national match pistols called American Beauty, one on the Colt New Service revolver. Then I did a 3-volume series, one of the volumes that just come out just this month also, Smith & Wesson revolvers, first one dealing with .357 Magnum revolvers, the next one dealing with K-frame revolvers generally, and the last volume that just came out on in-frame revolvers and X-frame revolvers that just came out this past month, which are very nice. I guess I'm now up to 14 books that I've written. I also write articles from time to time for various gun magazines. And basically, everybody always asks, the next question is, well, how you have time to do this? And of course, in my business, you find that you're ending up with people either A, that don't show up when they're supposed to show up at your office, or B, they show up and don't bring what they're supposed to bring with them when they come in, so they have to sit out in your waiting room while they finish up doing what they should have done at home. Or alternatively, you're waiting down at court for the judge to either show up or get finished with some of your colleagues' cases that are going to be called before yours. And as I tell everyone, if you write 2 hours a day on books, you'll be surprised how much you can get written. It's just a matter of, make a good outline, figure out what you want to talk about, and then go from point to point on your outline. And if you write 2 hours a day on this type of thing, which frankly most people have 2 hours a day that they just kind of fritter away anyway. So if you do that, you can get a lot of stuff written if you work at it diligently.
Yeah, absolutely. So 365 guns. What was kind of the concept behind this book?
Well, when they first came to me and asked me to write this book, it sounds kind of like a silly topic, to tell you the truth, because, that 365 guns, this company that puts this out, they have a whole series of these 365 books, and, like 365 cars and 365 motorcycles and 365 beers and this type of thing. And I asked them to send me a copy of one of their books. They sent me one of their 365 autos you should drive. And I thought it was very kind of an interesting concept when you think about it. But, of course, the one that they'd written previously was like the automobiles. These guys who wrote this book, they had driven these cars. They just were writing about these cars. Well, I told them, I said, I won't write about anything that I haven't personally shot myself. It's not fair to your readers. I have a friend of mine who also writes gun articles all the time. Some of your readers or listeners probably are familiar with Leroy Thompson. He and I are good friends. And I always tell Leroy, I said, you have to remember that there are people out there reading this material, and they may have limited funds and they may have limited number of guns they can buy, and when you talk about something, you have to give them a straight story about what it is and the good points and the bad points, and the only way you can do that is to actually physically go out and shoot them and test them and review them that way. So I said to the folks, I said, I'll be happy to write the book, but it gets to be, it has to be about guns that I've shot, and it has to be guns that are kind of fun. And this isn't what I view as some big grim subject. It should be fun. If it's not fun, why are you doing it? Okay. So they were agreeable to that, and they said, you pick whatever you want, whatever you like, you pick them. And I said, okay. I said, no, I don't do black powder guns. I don't do non-cartridge guns, I should say, really. So it's going to be all cartridge stuff, and we'll start like an 1870 and come forward, and we'll just pick ones that I like. So that's what I did, and I thought it came out really nice because we have a variety of different things. We, go from the 50 caliber Browning heavy machine gun to a single shot 22 Child's rifle. Okay, and it makes for a nice kind of mix, I think, and it shows up nice. Now, it got to be a lot bigger project than you might think at first because keeping it all organized. One of my secretaries here in the office, Debbie, was really responsible for trying to keep it all organized, and she's threatening mutiny when we do a second volume in this series, I think, because it gets to be quite the challenge to keep 365 articles and keep them all straight and keep them all with the proper photographs and keep all the material together and keep all the specs together so that you don't do something that looks stupid. But it came out pretty good in the end.
Yeah, it's a really nice, high quality book too. Like the pages and the printing and the photographs, and it's really well put together. And I thought it was pretty interesting and neat that you broke the different sections up by countries. I guess it's where the guns were manufactured, is how they're categorized.
Right. What we did it by countries. Where they, adopted them in the military, or they use them in police service, or they might have. So this book is really oriented towards police, self-defense, military applications. Okay, and so of course naturally the most of the foreign countries, they are not like we are. Most places in the world, ignore elemental human rights and try to keep their populace from being armed because they know if they're armed, they'll be able to assert their human rights, and they want to keep these people oppressed. So, as a consequence, there's usually, in most countries, a limited demand for certain types of sporting firearms, whereas here in the United States, since we try to get people to respect human rights, we have a big, vibrant market for that type of thing. So, I don't cover a lot of sporting guns in here because, frankly, they're not that interesting, in my opinion, to me anyway, because I'm more interested in military, police, and personal defense guns.
Yeah, which is kind of right up my alley too. I'm the same way, so that's great.
So it's. I think you have to always recognize. For instance, when we were talking about doing a second volume, like the Winchester Model 70 rifle, it's a nice rifle, and you could argue that it has, interesting sporting applications, but in point of fact, who, as probably a lot of your readers know, who is one of the most famous users of the Model 70 Winchester rifle in .30-06 with a 4-power scope? Fidel Castro. And that was his weapon that he used during the Revolution. Okay, it was his Model 70, and there's many pictures of Fidel with his Model 70 Winchester.
Well, let's talk about some of the more interesting guns that you have in this book. Do you have maybe a top 5 you'd like to touch on?
Well, interesting is kind of a relative term. I think there are certain things that are some of your readers or listeners may not be familiar with, and I would point out to them. I think some of the more interesting weapons, I think the Glock 18 machine pistol, a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with it, even if they may not have shot it. The Glock 18 machine pistol is, without a doubt, one of the best military personal defense handguns in the world. It's a serious weapon, particularly in selective fire mode. because you can fire it either semi-automatically or fully automatically, and that's a very good weapon. Now, it's not a weapon to be used by amateur knights by any means, but for someone who's willing to practice with it and work at it, this is a very effective weapon. The Soviet Stechkin machine pistol is another one that a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with the weapon, but may not have had a chance to shoot it. And as a consequence, you see all these articles in the books where people obviously have never fired them, talking about how ridiculous they are. In point of fact, it's the incredibly controllable weapon. It has a fairly low cyclic rate, and it also doesn't have much in the way of recoil, and the combination allows you to fire it very effectively. So all these articles that you see, they're talking about how this is a stupid weapon. They're obviously written by people who don't understand them or don't know about them. Another one's a good example is the FG-42, which I test here in the book. That's, of course, the German wartime rifle made for the Luftwaffe. They made two variants of it, and unfortunately, those are very expensive weapons here in the United States, so I had no one who was willing to let me use their $165,000 FG-42 and test it. But fortunately, in Switzerland, I know somebody who has a variety of them and was more than happy to let me shoot both models, and as well as take them for a walk. And as a consequence, I had an opportunity to shoot them quite extensively. And they fire, of course, from an open bolt when they're on full auto and a closed bolt on semi. And they have a muzzle brake on the front, which is incredibly effective, such that when you fire it on full auto, even though the weapon only weighs 8.5 pounds and fires a full 8 by 57 millimeter rifle cartridge, the muzzle actually goes down instead of going up. It's such an effective compensator on it. And I think it's interesting because you see articles all the time about these guns that are obviously written by people who've never fired them. There was an article in the American Rifleman a few months ago, and obviously the guy who wrote the article has never shot one of these guns because he was talking about how they're uncontrollable in full auto fire. Well, he's obviously never fired one because they're totally controllable in full auto fire, thanks to that wonderful compensator that is on the front. And that's an incredibly interesting weapon that a lot of people don't have a chance to shoot much of because they're rare guns and they're very expensive here in the United States because there's very few of them around and parts are very difficult to get, etc. So most people aren't going to ever have a chance to shoot them. So it talks about it in the book, and I think it's interesting. There's a wide variety of guns that are all very interesting. I mean, and we always have to decide what it is what we want to, be involved with. In the book, I talk about the 475 Linebaugh that was made by my friend John Linebaugh up in Cody, Wyoming, which is a converted Ruger that he re-barrels and re-cylinders to a chamber for his big 475 Linebaugh cartridge. That's a very interesting weapon. I mean, it has a niche. It's obviously not a general purpose weapon, but it's an interesting weapon, and if you have a need for it or a desire for it, that type of weapon, it's interesting to talk about and review. I do think also one other thing I would point out to your readers, and I point to our listeners, I point this out in regard to this latest thing we've seen here that the U.S. military is talking about putting out specs for a new handgun. And that's interesting to me because, of course, having tested all these military handguns from 1870 to the current date, it's interesting to me is that apparently a lot of people don't seem to realize that military handguns are not basically handguns that you would use for like an IPSC course, or they're not handguns to be used like for police departments or personal defense. They're different because in the military, your handgun should be something that's small enough that you can carry on your person, hidden from sight. Because if you have weapons that people see, and you see you carrying handguns, they of course have figured out that you're important and they want to shoot you. Okay, so you want to have them small enough that you can keep them in like the breast pocket of your fatigue shirt. Okay, keep them out of the way. And so you see all these alleged military handguns, like they have, like the current one that the Marine Corps just adopted, the variant of the 45 Model 1911A1 with a rail and whatnot. This is obviously not a good choice. What you need is a weapon that can shoot through body armor, or more critically nowadays, since you see so many of our foes on the field, they'll wear these chest-mounted bandoliers, and they have AK-47 magazines in them. So you end up with a magazine, that's steel with steel cased ammo in it, and they're wearing it across their chest. Well, that's the effect of basically body armor. For instance, if you take a 45 ACP pistol with regular ball ammo, you can't penetrate 2 magazines of AK-47's ammo and penetrate through them to go into that person's chest when you shoot them. So if you shoot them with your handy-dandy 45, you're going to find that it won't penetrate through. If you use standard ball ammo like is issued in the U.S. military, it won't go through either. So effectively, you've accomplished nothing. A military handgun in today's world has to be capable, the ammunition has to be capable of penetrating through at least 2 magazines of AK-47 ammo worn in a chest pouch. Otherwise, you're accomplishing nothing. And none of these current specs require them to have AP-type capable ammo in them, which is odd in my world. Additionally, they don't seem to spec them properly for being allowed to be shoot with mittens. They have trigger guards that are so small that you can't put your fingers in them when you're wearing your mittens in the cold weather. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners have been out shooting their weapons wearing mittens just like I have, and they're happy they have an AR-15 or an M16 type rifle where they can push the trigger guard down and shoot them wearing their mittens. So it's interesting to me is that a lot of people have a bad tendency to take military weapons and view them the same as personal defense weapons or police weapons, and they're just simply not the same. They shouldn't be confused with such.
Well, that's really interesting. So, if you were in charge of choosing the next military handgun, what would be some of your choices?
Well, interesting enough, I was thinking about this, and I was writing an article on the subject because I thought it was kind of an interesting concept, because the military is not going to demand any particular cartridge in this test. So, for instance, like I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with the FN57 by 28 millimeter cartridge, which is now chambered for their FN57 pistols, which of course is tested in my 365 book. And that's a very effective cartridge. It's available with, penetrator, AP penetrator bullets, and that cartridge will, penetrate through, with the AP penetrator, will go through AK-47 magazines loaded with steel-cased ammo, and go through 2 of those magazines and exit the pouch so they'll be able to engage in your target's body as opposed to being stopped by that pouch. That's something that we should look into. Maybe there's, an opportunity there. Maybe it's, there was a French writer back prior to the World War I. His name was Leloup, and Leloup, writing in the early 1900s, talked about how he thought the, day of the large bore cartridge was, going to be going away, and the small bore cartridge was going to be the cartridge of the day. Now, of course, his thoughts didn't involve anything to do with body armor or anything like that. His thoughts dealt with the fact that they were going to small bore rifle cartridges, so that it made sense to him to go to small bore pistol cartridges. And of course, we found during the First World War that really doesn't work too well. But there's some argument here. Should this be something like a 5.7 by 28? Should it be something like the 30 Luger, which gives you better penetration if you use AP? Should you just use 9 millimeter with the AP projectiles? I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with the Czech 9 millimeter ammo that used to come into the country back years ago. That all had the little steel penetrators in them. Those rounds, will go through things like that. So you need to have, it's the ammo, first off, you have to figure out. Maybe, you can make any kind of ammo you want, but it'll have good penetration if you work at it. A lot of your listeners will remember back when KTW was around. KTW made 45 ACP ammo that would do that. So, first off, we have to make sure we have weapons that the cartridge will allow us to go through the kind of material that we should anticipate encountering. And as you watch TV and you see all the latest little rabble-rousers all overseas, if you notice, they're all wearing their little Chinese-made magazine pouches across their chest. Well, that's the equivalent of they're wearing body armor. And don't ever kid yourself about it. So if you can't go through that, you're going to be stuck. I think it also should be small. It should be a small pistol. It should have a trigger guard that folds out of the way. And I think there's some argument, and I haven't thought this completely through, but I think there's some argument whether or not there's a place for small miniaturized red dot sights on the military pistol of the future. I'm sure a lot of your listeners use red dots on their pistols of various types, and some of these red dots are now gotten small enough that you can put them on a small pistol. Gabe Suarez, I'm sure some of your people are familiar with Gabe Suarez. Gabe's been very much in the forefront of developing red dot sight applications for Glock pistols, and he made a point which I thought was quite interesting when he talked about putting them on a Glock 26 pistol. He said that that was probably the best application for the red dot was on the Glock 26 because, of course, being sharps in a pistol, the sight radius is quite small on a Glock 26, and that sometimes would limit your ability to engage targets at a distance. But if you put a red dot on it, it doesn't make any difference whether it's a Glock 26 or whether it's a Glock 17, because the red dot gives you the same sight pattern whether you got it on a long pistol or a short pistol. So maybe there's an argument that the pistol of the future should be like the size of a Glock 43, that's the new 9mm Glock, with a red dot sight application and a trigger guard that folds down, loaded up with steel cord 9mm ammo.
Well, that makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. I mean, if you think about the military's current battle rifles, a lot of the new guys are saying that they really don't get trained on the iron sights anymore. It's just all ACOG right out of the chute. They all have ACOGs on them, and then you go into where all your pistols would have a rock solid, reliable red dot on it. Eventually, I could see that.
Well, I think for someone like myself who's been doing this for many, many years, we remember when these red dots first started coming out. The first one of those that I remember was made in Sweden back maybe 40 years ago almost now. And, everybody kind of shoved up their nose about it and went, I don't like one of those things on those. They'll always break down and the batteries always go down at the worst possible time. And then you're, stuck with something that you can't use. And so, of course, people like my age were all going, who wants that? But to give them their due, they've gotten incredibly reliable. The battery life now is, longer than anyone's tour duty is going to be any place. I mean, some of this battery life of these red dots now, you can turn them on and leave them on for like 3 years. Yeah. Well, no one's lucky enough not to get hurt in 3 years. I mean, no one's that lucky. That's just not going to happen. So, and some of them don't require any batteries at all. I've got some red dot type sights that are like, I guess they're fueled by some, nuclear material or something. I don't know what it is that makes them glow, but they glow without a battery. So, they're pretty nice that way, and they're small enough now that you can put them on handguns. I've got my home defense gun that I use. I've got one of the Smith & Wesson Core pistols that they come from the factory. They're equipped that you can put them a red dot on them without having to send them to your custom gunsmith to be mutilated. And that's pretty nice. In my book, 365, there's a picture of the new FNP 45 Tactical that's got a red dot type sight on it that way, and that's small enough. You could mount one of those on a small pistol that was small enough that you could stick in your breast pocket of your fatigue shirt. I mean, what you don't want is these pistols that are so big and so heavy that you have to wear them on your belt. Because when you wear your pistol on your belt, first off, everybody sees it. Second off, as you're crawling through the mud, it just picks up all the mud and crud. And I'd rather have an extra magazine of ammunition in a light pistol than a heavy pistol. I think, you have to recognize that the military application for handguns is different than the application for civilian defense guns or police guns. Just like in the police service, I like Glock pistols. I think they're probably the best military handgun in the world. They're very reliable. They're very durable. They're just great weapons, okay? Now, having said that, I'm not sure that that's the best handgun for police work for uniformed police officers, because we know that most police officers, most of their service involves car stops for people getting speeding tickets and making improper lane changes and all that kind of stuff, or going to domestic disturbance calls where you've been to the same house 15 times already, right? And we know that 20% of the police officers in the United States get shot with their own weapons. In an actual test that I've done with that type of thing, I found that, police, if you take an untrained shooter, and most people who kill police officers, if you study it statistically, you'll find that most police officers who get killed are killed by people who've never fired a gun before. Okay? And 20% of them are getting killed with their own guns, because as we say in the police biz, every call you go to is an armed call, because you're bringing the arms.
Right.
Okay? So with that in mind, if you take a standard weapon and you give it to an untrained person and you say, see how long it takes to fire this gun. Well, they'll pick up a double-action revolver and fire it, boom, bang. They'll pick up a Glock and pick it up, bang. You give them certain weapons, and it's harder for them to figure that out. And that's why, like a .45 automatic, a government model, with the safety put on, as long as the safety is the same color as the rest of the pistol, not a different color, my experience was it takes about 15 seconds on average for these people to figure out that's a safety and push it off to fire it. Okay? Now, in 15 seconds, you ought to be able to get out your PR-24 or your, Aspeton or your backup gun and take care of your problem versus, the guy tailing your Glock. So, for instance, in police service, you have a different set of requirements than you do in the military. In the military, you have people who are typically being supervised by other people all the time, whereas in police service, they're out on the street by themselves. In police service, they're constantly coming up against people who they don't view as dangerous because it's a traffic stop or it's a house stop or domestic disturbance. And that's most of what they have. People who watch TV, they think that police service is constant shootouts with, armed robbers and gangbangers and terrorists. Well, that's not true. Most of it's going to answer calls about, an auto accident or a traffic ticket of some type or domestic disturbance, or you're responding to something else of that nature. And what you want for the police officer is some weapon that has proprietary in its nature, so that if they grab that weapon away from them, they can't shoot it so readily. That's why, for instance, I'm sure you're probably familiar. Are you familiar with Joe Smith and the magnet trigger safeties for Smith & Wesson revolvers?
No, not really.
A gentleman by the name of Joe Smith a number of years ago, and Masad Ayoub's brother-in-law still offers them for sale. He developed a trigger safety, what's called a magnet trigger safety. It's a module that goes in the front grip of your K-frame or your J-frame Smith & Wesson revolvers. And basically, it used high-quality magnets, and it would swing a pivot depending upon where you put your hands. And without those rings on, those weapons couldn't be fired, period. End of discussion. So, for instance, like when my daughter was a little girl, and she would have girlfriends come over and, whatnot, and my daughter was fine because she grew up around weapons and she knew how she was supposed to be. But some of her girlfriends, I understood, may have come from, culturally backward homes and not been, they've been culturally deprived and not taught about guns, okay? So you have to be thoughtful about that when you have small children around, right? So my Model 66 and my Model 49 that I used, both of them had magnet trigger safeties in them. So that the only way they could be fired is when they were in my hands with my rings on that had these magnets in the base of the rings, and otherwise they couldn't be fired, period. And that makes an ideal thing for some place that you're concerned about your weapons being either snatched from you or otherwise. Now, the problem, of course, is that as these magnet trigger safeties, they have these high-intensity magnets for your rings, and, of course, if you wear those around computers, they'll scramble the computer. And, of course, they were so powerful, these magnets are so powerful that literally you could put your hand 12 inches above a paperclip and pick the paperclip off the ground, okay? I was down at court one time, not federal court, and of course I didn't have my weapon with me, but I had my rings on because I had left my weapons in the car. And I asked the judge, I've got finished with my witness, and I had some document I wanted to submit, and I said, may I approach the judge? And he said, yes, Mr. Mullin. And I said, may I have a paperclip, Judge? And he said, certainly, Mr. Mullin. And I put my hand out to grab the paperclip up like I typically did at my office, because I always like to watch him jump up to my rings. And of course, it jumped up from his bench like 12 inches to my ring, which I took the paperclip off, and he caught it kind of out of the corner of his eye, and he didn't quite know. He wasn't sure what he had seen. He wasn't quite sure how I managed to get the paper clips to jump in the air, but he kind of thought that's what it was. But you could see he didn't quite understand, but I never told him because I figured, it was just, he thought I could make paper clips jump through the air.
Yeah, some of those Jedi Force powers, right?
Yeah. But I mean, that's what I think you have to keep in mind. So you don't ever. What always amuses me is that there are people who honestly think that the military is like an IPSC pistol match, or the military is like police service, and that's not true. The military is not like police service, and the police is not like military service. I find always kind of amusing when you get these places where they have these people, and they'll train them with police tactics to solve military applications, and you see this from time to time on the news where these guys were all going to be going into some room or something like this, and they're all standing there with their arms on each other's shoulders. Well, that might work fine in the police biz, where you're used to going in and taking some serrated steak knife away from Joe Blow, who's got it at his girlfriend's throat because he's tired of her food, but it's not really that good an idea when the guys on the other side of the wall got a PKM light machine gun.
I think that about brings us up on our time, TJ.
Okay.
So, final thoughts?
I'm glad to visit with you today. I hope everybody likes the book, and I think you'll find it. If you like a variety of different guns and you like a variety of different quick evaluations of stuff, a couple of people that I've talked to, they've said they specifically like the fact that they can read an article or two about some different gun, and they got 5 or 10 minutes and they're not doing something else, they want to pick it up, they can read it and get some good guns fixed there in 5 or 10 minutes about 2 or 3 or 4 different types of guns, and they can put it away and do whatever it is they're going to do and pick it up later. And it's not like a novel they have to sit there and laboriously try to keep straight of the characters. It will be available apparently in Walmart, which I thought was interesting. So and it's also cool. Obviously available on Amazon.com, and the other books that I mentioned are also available on Amazon.com. If any of your listeners are interested, they can punch up Timothy J. Mullin, and it'll show up on Amazon.com, where it also comes out as TJ Mullin too.
Yep, and I have direct links to those in the show notes at gunguyradio.com/178. So you guys can check those out and use our Amazon affiliate link, too, when you purchase those. So, well, it's been a pleasure to have you on, TJ. We'll have to get you on over on some of the other programs here on the Firearms Radio Network. Seems like you have a wealth of knowledge and a lot of good stories to share.
Good. Nice talking with y'all.
Again, a big thank you to TJ for coming on the program. And Gun Guy Gear makes this episode of Gun Guy Radio possible. Funny, the name's really similar there, huh? So you can check out gunguygear.com, which is actually my newest venture. So we're looking at launching a gun holster and apparel company here, so we're kind of doing a soft launch here with some phone holsters, and also for the tobacco lovers, we have holsters for them as well, where you can holster up your cigars or your cigarette packs or your chewing tobacco canisters. There's 3 different products there under tobacco lovers over on gunguygear.com, and also, the phone holsters are pretty awesome as well. Black carbon fiber, heavy-duty belt clip phone holsters. check that out, gunguygear.com.
Well, I didn't think you had it in you.
I'm your Huckleberry. Why, Johnny Ringo, you look like somebody just walked over your grave.
Fight's not with you, Holiday.
I beg to differ, sir. We started a game we never got to finish. Play for blood, remember?
I was just fooling about.
I wasn't. Say when. Show Johnny Ringo who's boss with Patriot Patch Company's Huckleberry Patch, a must-have for any range bag. Pre-order yours today at patriotpatch.co.
Gun Guy Radio says thank you and proudly displays artwork and graphics designed by Ryan Cross of Hunter of Design. HunterofDesign.com.
And if you'd like to keep Pro Gun Radio like this coming at you, head on over to patreon.com/FRN to pledge your support for the Firearms Radio Network Patreon campaign, and also patreon.com/gun to pledge your support for this program specifically. Well, that about wraps us up this week. Remember to subscribe over on iTunes so you never miss a show. Leave us that iTunes review. And also, please consider joining the NRA and the Second Amendment Foundation. And don't forget to check out all the other awesome shows here on the Firearms Radio Network. Well, that's a wrap, and we'll see you next week.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv. Freedom. How does one maintain freedom? That's a question our founding fathers pondered over 200 years ago. They believed the solution was in our Constitution and its amendments. We exercise the freedom of speech every day here at FRN, along with the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Preserving freedom. We believe the Second Amendment could possibly be that one amendment that protects all the rest. Help us to preserve America as a shining light on the hill. We do our part by providing entertainment and information that supports the Second Amendment every day. Preserving freedom. What do you believe? Get involved. Show your support at patreon.com/FRN.